Cut content. Every game has it. Deepwoken is no exception. Throughout development, games cut things. Maybe they don't fit in the developing vision of the game, maybe the content that was cut was seen as lower quality compared to newer development. Regardless, games remove things all the time, and this video is going to be going over all of the stuff that I could find as far as removed content goes for Deepwoken. Funnily enough, this video was actually requested by Grimkind. For those of you who don't know, he's now the content manager and lead developer of Rogue Lineage at this point, which was Monad Studios' last game, and he asked me to do this almost a year ago, at which, I did, so I guess he just didn't see that video because he reminded me in the last one. Go watch it, Grimkind. Regardless, I'm making another one because I want to cover some stuff that I missed in that video, as well as stuff that was cut after the last video was made, because there actually has been content removed from the games in shadow updates. Anyway, today I'll be going over cut mechanics, places, and even lore additions that may or may not be still relevant to the game's overall story. Make sure to subscribe, since only about 20% of the people watching this video right now are actually subscribed. And now let's get straight into it. Alright, first of all, and the most obvious example of cut content, which by the way isn't even cut anymore, would be the Meteor Isle and Shipment Mission Island, which is known as the Isle of Crows, which to this day still hasn't come back. Now, the Meteor Isle was brought back into the game pretty much exclusively because of popular demand, because the Meteor Isle as an island wasn't initially very useful, and it was actually initially removed from testing, or at least post-testing, because it was just kind of useless. Even in the Deepwoken Direct, when we see it, there really isn't anything important on that island, with it only being used as a combat arena in the Deepwoken Direct. However, the second location shown in the Direct is the Isle of Crows, in which they do the Shipment Mission. Now, the Shipment Mission was removed long before the game came out, and honestly, it was still kind of a bit disappointing, and honestly, it still is a little bit disappointing. However, I do understand why to a degree. Deepwoken over time became less linear in its progression because the developers wanted to make it more freeform in comparison to their predecessor, which was Rogue Lineage, which was their last project, which had completely linear, basically completely restricting progression due to the way it was designed. Deepwoken was made with a lot more freedom because they didn't like the heavy restrictions, so, this time in, they're making a game, they removed most of the mission-related experience gain stuff because it made the game more linear, and people are more likely to grind quests for experience because it's easier than figuring out other stuff to do, and a lot of the time quests usually just offer better experience than just killing stuff, especially if you have quests that involve killing stuff. However, it was sad to see the Isle of Crows never get implemented because the Shipment Mission was actually pretty cool, and the entire design of the island itself is actually really cool, and I think it would have been one of the cooler locations in Deepwoken if they did something nice with it, with its whole church and all that stuff on it. Along with that, there are a bunch of named locations which were removed in time for release, one of which being the Iron Fist Island, which was literally just an island full of Sharkos in pre-release. Like, I'm pretty sure the only reason it was there was like as a way to farm EXP mid-game, because it was just an island spammed with Sharko spawns. So, I mean, they removed it since it was probably likely only an EXP spamming zone. They removed due to it being lower in quality in comparison to the rest of the game islands, and also it just didn't fit their vision long term, obviously. It's literally an island you go to, and there's just spammed monster spawns all around, and then the environment is like kind of just flat and boring most of it. So yeah, it just was lower quality than the rest of the stuff that ended up making it into the game. The next one, which is a location I see potentially coming back, is the Corvus Manor. So if you've seen the other video, you know about Erebus and the Duke's Manor, which was its own island separate from the thing that was kind of like an island embedded in an island, and it was this whole massive thing, right? Now, this Corvus Manor was kind of like that, but it was like a manor that they had for the ministry agents, and it was possibly a ministry-based sort of location that was removed, leaving only Minotirsa, so it is possible that we may see a revamped version of the Corvus Manor in the future as a ministry base and maybe a potential boss fight location with one of the prophets. That could be really cool. It could also be an important location in case they ever drop, the ministry update, which we don't know if they're going to drop a ministry origin, because, I mean, the ministry are kind of like the bad guys of Deepwoken, so it's not completely guaranteed we get an origin for them, even though I think it is, because I remember the devs saying, oh, we might not have a ministry origin because they're the bad guys, but Contractor is kind of like halfway there already because you work with them. So I see a ministry origin probably coming, and if they do bring it in, they could probably bring back the Corvus Manor as like an important location. The next location is the Hidden Grove. I'm sure many of you have never heard of this location because for some reason it isn't documented very well, probably because, it wasn't always not in the game. It actually existed in the game at one point. That was when the game was public. Now, the Hidden Grove is quite interesting because it's one of two locations that were removed in more recent times post-testing, originally being within the Summer Isle by the Summer Company. Now, it had no real function, but if you poured water into the shrine, or really any liquid, it would start flowing in the fountain, and then a bunch of unique lotus flowers that I don't think are currently found in-game in the same color palettes would bloom around it. This honestly reminded me of Rogue Lineage, so if any of you remember the game or the name of the super rare flower in Rogue Lineage that only grew in one area that was like, it was removed from the game, but people would use it to dye their armor if they had it from like the older versions of the game, right? And it had like a special purple-red gradient on it, and I feel like this could have been similar to that, especially considering Deepwoken also has dye, and you could have made it like a super rare and unique dye. lie. Now that I think about it, it was the Frost Princess from Rogue Lineage, that was the flower name. Which also apparently might have been Shadow re-implemented into the game through like the druid stuff that you could get randomly and like a random chance, so that's cool. Thank you, Grimkind, if you were the one that did that. The final, not so major, but cool location they removed was the Dusklit Garden. It was just a garden in the Void Heart with trees and a single blacksmith, and it was removed because it was just kind of useless, similarly to the Hidden Grove. But I think both could have been repurposed into something with like lore implications, maybe surrounding like the Dusklit Garden being important to the Void Heart in some way. Maybe it's like a rebirthing chamber or something like that. That would be cool. Maybe like quest possibilities, like they could have done like a delicate flower quest with Hidden Grove or something like that, which would have been cool. Or just anything really, because the devs kind of just neglected these cool looking locations, which were kind of secretive, and then they just removed them from the game. So I hope they add something to them and then like add them back to the game. I think it would be pretty cool. Next up is the old pre-release mantra creation system. So back in the olden days of Deepwoken, Deepwoken had complete mantra creation in which you'd find cores and modifiers for mantras and completely make them from scratch essentially. So you'd find an attunement core for a specific attunement's mantra, and then you could trade them around for one if you didn't have the attunement for the attunements you do have, and then you'd have like a melee or ranged core, and then from there it'd be more like Deepwoken's current modifications with size or projectile additives with stuff like multiplying sparks. So you would end up with like your regular core, which would be your attunement core, then you'd be like, oh, melee mantra, what type? Do you want it to be like a grab mantra? Do you want it to be a blade mantra? And you choose blade, then you'd end up with like a fire blade or something. Now, I guess this was cut due to the testers complaining about it being too grindy, since you already had to grind for levels, and back then the experience gain was so bad. For those of you that didn't play Deepwoken on release, it probably takes like 8 hours to max a build back then, like release week, in comparison to the 2 hours you can do it in now. It was very slow. Now, so yeah, this was just kind of too grindy, so the developers implemented the mantra learning system directly into the cards and talent system, and they only kept the last tier of modifiers, which was like all the sparks and stuff that we currently have in game to modify our mantras with. Some people still argue whether or not they like the old mantra core system, but it was really done just to reduce some of the grind in game, because if this were on release with the game, it would have been miserable. And then we have another NPC, the infamous Baz. He was just kind of a useless joke NPC. Talking to him would make him say meow, and then Archmage started a rumor where if you talk to him enough times, you get a secret Felinor-like but not Felinor race. But this was probably not true because it was never confirmed before, you know, they just removed Baz out of the game. And I don't know why, because Baz was actually named after a friend of Archmage, so maybe they just stopped being friends and he was like, yeah, fuck you, I'm gonna take your NPC out of the game. I do get 2 F words before the video is no longer PG-13, so you're not allowed to complain in the comments because this video is not family friendly. It is considered PG clean. Now, the last one that I want to talk about are about the twin celestials Alsin and Nilsa. Now, the reason why I want to talk about them is because Alsin and Nilsa were the twin celestials mentioned in old lore, but given how much this game retcons and the fact that there is no mention of Nilsa in game, unlike Alsin, means that Nilsa could have actually been retconned from the lore for a variety of reasons. I mean, there's one old screenshot of the twins being Alsin and Nilsa, but the problem with this screenshot is it's very old, so it could have been retconned by then, and nobody mentions Nilsa at all in dialogue. We hear people say like praise Alsin, or like I'll send you to Alsin or something. Like, people talk about Alsin, who's a celestial who they kind of worship, but nobody ever brings up Nilsa, which is weird because assuming that they're twin gods, right? Or well, not gods, but celestials, but people kind of worship them like gods, right? Assuming that they're twins, they'd be on equal standing, so people would be mentioning Alsin and Nilsa together. Think about every mythology which has had sibling gods before. They're generally referred to and revered together, and if not together, then against each other, one or the other. But people don't talk about Nilsa at all, so it's very possible that Nilsa was actually cut and removed from the lore, and it was left with just Alsin. Also, more supporting stuff for this would be, I don't know, maybe the person who was Nilsa, the lore character, is just not affiliated with Deepwoken anymore. Maybe they did something bad, maybe they're not friends with the developers anymore. Regardless, Nilsa ended up getting most likely cut from the lore, but we'll see in time if Nilsa ends up becoming important again. But if she doesn't, then, well, Nilsa has been officially retconned. But until we get a statement on it, or, I don't know, wait 10 years and still hear nothing about Nilsa, Nilsa technically still might exist within the lore, so it's a weird gray area. Anyway, I have made a video on some of this stuff before, so if you want to go watch that part 1, which covers some stuff that wasn't in this video, as this video covered stuff that wasn't in that video, watch that. It's everything removed from Deepwoken, that's the title. Anyway, most of this is just newer stuff I never covered in that video or was removed post that video, like the garden and the Dusklit garden and the, what's the place called, the one with the flower and the thing, the Hidden Grove. God, I'm stupid. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. So shout outs to YouTube members of tier 2 or higher: Green, Brick, Goobka, Highcard, Philip, Wizzy My Tizzy, Axelor, Flying Noodle 559, Simply Mo, Elstern, Fun Guns, and Drizzy Drake Fan. The song cover that I have been doing for you guys is done, so it will be posted sometime next week. I ended up re-recording a song cover that I did. Well, technically I didn't upload it at all, but I ended up re-recording a new version of an older song cover that I did a few months ago. So yeah, you guys are going to get a new version of a song that I did that you guys probably didn't hear at all. Anyway, I love you all. Have an amazing day, as usual. Monthly song covers coming back for all YouTube members. Hope you guys enjoy those if you want to buy a YouTube membership. Anyway, goodbye.